Welcome to Daily Variety, your daily dose of news and analysis for entertainment industry insiders. It's Monday, April 20th, 2026. I'm your host, Cynthia Littleton. I am co-editor-in-chief of Variety alongside Ramin Satuda. I'm in LA, he's in New York, and Variety has reporters around the world covering the business of entertainment. In today's episode, we'll get a double-header from Variety executive editor Brent Lang. He is just back from CinemaCon in Las Vegas, and he has a lot of impressions to share about the state of moviegoing and the film industry. Exhibitors are talking about windows opening and the fear that the pipeline of product will shrink with the pending Paramount-Warner Brothers merger. And Brent also runs us through the weekend box office results. But before we get to all that, here are a few headlines just in this morning that you need to know. The AFI Lifetime Achievement Award presented to Eddie Murphy on Saturday was a fun and funny night. The comedian who defined his generation got a lot of heartfelt tributes from fellow comics. Kevin Hart, Bill Burr, Chris Rock, Arsenio Hall, and many others. It should all make for a great Netflix special that is set to drop on May 31st. Do not miss my colleague Gene Mattis's big story on how the Hollywood jobs crisis has become a big factor for the California governor's race. Several of the candidates are pushing plans that they say will restore the health of the industry in Southern California. All of these stories and so much more can be found on Variety.com right now. If it's Monday, we're talking box office. Brent Lang, Variety's executive editor, joins me to talk about the weekend and talk about some of the specialty titles that are a little lower on the chart this week. Brent Lang, thanks so much for joining me. Double duty on Daily Variety. Deeply appreciate it. You are a pro.
Happy to do it.
Well, hallelujah. It was another great weekend for Super Mario Galaxy movie and Project Hail Mary having the kind of legs that just exhibitors need that foot traffic. But I thought we could talk about a couple of the other items that are lower on the chart, but still interesting to look at where the box office stands through their performance. Let's start with The Drama from A24.
That's turning out to be a really nice art house hit for A24, and it's another sign of what the right star in the right project can do to a film. People really like this combination of Zendaya and Robert Pattinson, and the film itself is a comedy, kind of a darker rom-com, and I think that the distinctiveness of the premise, this idea that somebody has shared this secret that's ruined their relationship, and just A24 too as a brand that's known for doing these subversive types of films seems to have allowed this movie to break out well beyond the art house audience. That film has now made almost $40 million domestically, which is a very nice return for a movie of its size. I think it cost a little over $20 million, and it's doing quite well globally too. It's around 80 million.
Those are names that travel for sure.
Absolutely,
in this era.
yeah.
And also for Zendaya and Robert Pattinson, they are, balancing their mega blockbusters with some more artsy fare is like, that's a balanced diet in the life of an actor. Well,
Absolutely, and they will be in 3 films together this year. I mean, the other 2 it doesn't really matter what their chemistry is like, because it's The Odyssey, which is the Christopher Nolan film, and Dune Part 3, which I think are both going to be among the year's top grossing movies.
Well, while we're talking A24, let's talk about Mother Mary. Now, this is a very intriguing looking Anne Hathaway drama. I would imagine this is a tough one to market in terms of communicating to the audience what this movie is all about.
I have to say, I've seen some trailers for it, and I'm not sure I even really know what this is about. It seems to be something about a pop singer and a fashion designer, and it's kind of a psychosexual thriller. It did very well in limited release. It made about 170,000, which doesn't sound like a huge number, but that's from just 5 locations. So that's one of the larger per screen averages of the year. The question is, will this movie work as it expands? I'm not positive. I think that Anne Hathaway and Michaela Cole definitely have constituencies, and maybe those people will turn out. David Lowery, the director, is a very, very talented director. Anne Hathaway is got Devil Wears Prada 2 coming out in 2 weeks, so I'm not sure how much promotion she can really do for this film. Anne Hathaway is also really shrewd at how she does press. She doesn't sort of oversaturate the market. She picks her spots. She says interesting, provocative things when she does interviews. She's really very, very canny when it comes to her public image.
The title, with a little bit bigger profile that did open to somewhat disappointingly, that I'm gathering from your story, was Lee Cronin's The Mummy. What were expectations for this movie?
This is on the lower end of expectations. It opened to about $13.5 million. I don't think people were expecting a ton from this movie. It's fairly cheap. It's a Blumhouse atomic monster movie. They keep budgets low. I think it cost about $22 million. So 13.5 isn't like a disastrous start, but it's not a particularly good one either. Partly because horror movies tend to have very, very steep drop-offs in their second weekend. And it doesn't seem like the critics were really behind this one. So I don't think it's a disaster, but it's Warner Brothers and New Line were probably hoping for when they greenlit this film.
So backing up now to the top of the box office, anything about the hold for Super Mario Galaxy Movie or Project Hail Mary at this late stage in both of their releases, anything that stands out to you about this weekend?
When you're looking at what Super Mario Galaxy Movie is doing, it's running a little bit behind the Super Mario Brothers movie. I think it's about like $60 million behind, but it's still a huge gross and a very, very successful run. It's definitely a franchise. I think it's now, as a franchise, just these two movies, they have earned over $2 billion at the box office. This is a movie that is easily going to eclipse the $1 billion mark, which is a harder and harder thing to do because of the way that the global box office landscape is looking. You have big markets like Russia that are basically offline, China that has gotten a lot more into its local product, and yet this is a movie that seems to be resonating everywhere that it can play. And I think it's also a sign of a real shift in Hollywood right now, away from comic book movies, which are showing a lot of signs of fatigue, and towards video game adaptations.
Brent, thank you, as always, for your diligent work to help variety readers understand what's going on at the box office.
Thanks for having me back.
And now we'll hear from Brent Lang in a conversation recorded Friday afternoon, hours after he stepped off a red-eye flight coming back to New York from Las Vegas after a week at CinemaCon. Brent Lang, recovering after a full week in Las Vegas with your favorite studios and your friends in exhibition. How are you holding up after completing CinemaCon 2026?
Well, a little weary. It was an interesting week. It's always great to go to Las Vegas and see these presentations because you really get a sense of what's on the horizon and how people are feeling generally about the state of the business. And this year, it was such a change of attitude. And I think a lot of that is because you had some really big hits with the Super Mario Brothers sequel and, of course, Project Hail Mary. And the year before, the box office was in a really, really big slump. It was right before Sinners had come out in a Minecraft movie, and you were just in a real hole, and you could feel it. This year, exhibitors, I wouldn't say they were feeling hyper confident, but they kind of had gotten their groove back a little bit, and there was this sense of optimism, of momentum, and that their best days might not be behind them.
What did you hear in the hallways? The benefit of this is the networking, the schmooze, the conversations that you can have by running into somebody. What's the mood? What's the vibe?
There were two big topics that were dominating conversations, I should say. The first was that Universal has committed to a longer theatrical window. They were the studio that was most aggressive in shortening the length of time that movies are exclusively on the big screen. They had it down to as little as 17 days on certain films. And they just recently committed to going to 45 days in 2027. So I think exhibitors were feeling like that was a really big boost for them because there's a sense that during COVID, the shorter windows really conditioned people to just wait at the home for things that came out in the big screen and to not go out of their house, to just wait till it hit streaming, and that was really taking a big bite out of revenue. So that move by Universal was almost an acknowledgement that, you know what, this doesn't quite work. We do need theatrical We do need the spotlight that a big big splashy theatrical release puts on our movies. Though that doing that helps the studios too, because it actually means that they will get more eyeballs on and more rentals, and all of the downstream revenue will actually rise because of that launching pad. So that was the good part of.
Of course, 2021 was a crazy time for the business, but that 17-day window, that was a Jeff Shell decision that did not age well and
It
now has
did
been
not.
put to
Yeah.
bed.
It did not age well, and I would also say exhibitors share some of the blame. Now, they were in a really, really desperate situation. I understand why they agreed to those terms. And basically, what they agreed to was initially they were cut in on some of that revenue. And when they were basically literally shut down, they desperately needed that revenue. But that cut, my understanding is that went away. So they actually ended up sort of trading future earnings for that short-term gain. And they were really, really feeling the pinch there. So I think the reset has people feeling better about the overall health of the ecosystem. Now, that was the good thing that people were talking about. Where people felt a little more conflicted, not even a little more conflicted, I'd say a lot more conflicted, is this pending merger between Paramount and Warner Brothers. And that had really dramatic different reactions. And you almost felt over the course of the 4 days in Las Vegas like there was a sort of a tonal shift about how people were viewing David Ellison's attempts to take over Warner Brothers and merge it with Paramount. Initially, the first couple of days, you had a big petition that was signed by a lot of A-list stars like Kristen Stewart, Javier Bardem, Glenn Close coming out strong against that deal. And you also had Cinema United, which puts on CinemaCon. You had Michael O'Leary, the head of that organization, saying in no uncertain terms, we are against consolidation. Consolidation is bad for this industry. We oppose this merger. However, by Thursday, when David Ellison took the stage to present his slate, things had shifted. The mood had really, really shifted. And that morning, Adam Aron, who is the head of AMC, the world's largest exhibition chain.
The very colorful head of AMC, we must add.
Yes, fond of quoting Winston Churchill on earnings calls, which I think he is a singular force in doing that. But he had come out in support of that deal, so that was a big boost in the arm for Paramount, because my sense was they were worried they were losing the theater owners, and the theater owners' opposition to Netflix had hurt Netflix's attempts to buy Warner Brothers. I'm convinced of that.
There was so much noise around that, even if they didn't, they certainly didn't have a vote, but it added to the chorus.
Absolutely. So I think his support really helped them. And then just a couple of hours later, David Ellison took the stage in the Coliseum at Caesar's Palace, and he told movie theaters, he said, I'm going to look you in the eye, and I'm going to promise you that we are going to make 30 films a year between Warner Brothers and Paramount. I'm committed to making that at a minimum. I'm going to commit to making that. And that's actually more than those two studios were producing independently just last year. So that got huge applause in the room. You sort of felt the mood shift towards Ellison. And then there was also a sizzle reel that John Chu had directed, that Tom Cruise was narrating, that had this kind of cavalcade of A-listers, that if you thought the people who signed the petition opposing the sale were big names, well, you should have seen the people who were in this video. It was people like Will Smith, Timothée Chalamet, Tom Cruise, James Cameron. It was some of the biggest stars in Hollywood right now who are all part of this video, sort of talking about this new era at Paramount. Now, I do think that people were feeling very supportive of this. My understanding is James Cameron was on the ground at CinemaCon telling people he feels that this is a better deal. This is better for theaters. He was against the Netflix deal. I'm not sure that people should be feeling like, they're out of the woods here. I understand that David Ellison, I do think he genuinely supports the theatrical experience. He is a film fan. It's very easy for him to commit to making 30 films a year right now, because so many of these films are already dated. They're already in various stages of production. So he's going to have no trouble hitting 30 films next year, the year after that, and even the year after that. But I think when it comes a little bit farther in the future, when you look at the amount of debt that Paramount and Warner Brothers is going to be carrying because of this merger, being able to actually produce 30 films, also being able to just find 30 projects that are worthy of being released theatrically, I think that is going to be a daunting challenge.
Just even the cost of marketing 30 films, even at different levels, for a company that is going to have a boulder of $79 billion in debt.
And I would also add that Disney, when Disney bought Fox, Disney made the exact same promise that David Ellison made in Las Vegas, and they have not made good on their word. They are making fewer films today than when those two studios operated independently. So I'm really not sure there's much of a historical precedent that should make those theater owners confident that David Ellison, no matter what his intentions are today, is going to be able to deliver on that promise that he made in Las Vegas this week.
Tell me, in terms of what was presented on stage and the clips you saw, what impressed you?
I was really impressed by Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. This man clearly is operating at the height of his powers, and it was visually arresting. It looked unlike anything I'd sort of seen on the screen before, and it's going to be shot entirely with IMAX cameras. He said it was one of the most difficult movies he'd ever shot. It was sort of hell to shoot, and he said, but in the best way. And I think that that's going to be all on the screen. I can't imagine that's not going to do really big business this summer. I also thought that Toy Story 5 looked really charming. It seems like they've kind of figured out a way to bring that franchise into the modern sort of tablet digital era. Looked really, really like Pixar at its best. I also felt that the Avengers movie got a huge reaction. I'm not a superhero fan, but people seem to be really into that. I thought Disney's slate seemed very, very strong. I think there's personally, I'm really interested to see Steven Spielberg's Disclosure Day. I'm a child of the 80s and the 90s, so I kind of grew up with his popcorn era masterpieces. I'm wondering if he still got it, frankly. I've talked to some people who've seen it who say it's a lot of action, but there's also a lot of heart. And I think the questions he's kind of asking about intelligent life in the universe feel very relevant. And he really made a really passionate plea for Hollywood to keep investing in original stories. He basically said, this business is going to run out of gas if we don't do this. And I agree with him.
Brent, thank you for working hard to bring CinemaCon coverage to the masses.
Oh, thanks for having me.
As we close out today's episode, here's a few things we're watching for. Variety hosts our annual Entertainment Marketing Summit in Los Angeles on Wednesday. We have a packed lineup. I'm excited to speak with Warner Brothers Pictures Chief Pam Abdi and NBC Universal TV Chief Perlina Igbokwe. Thursday will bring first quarter earnings from Comcast, and Thursday is also the day that Warner Brothers Discovery shareholders will vote on the Paramount Skydance transaction. It'll be a busy day. Looking ahead to next week, we're excited about the 17th annual Turner Classic Movies Festival, which runs April 30th through May 3rd in Hollywood. We love to hear from our listeners, so please send thoughts, gripes, and other feedback about Daily Variety to podcasts@variety.com. Before we go, congrats to Joanne Bradford. The tech, media, and banking veteran has joined Alex Cooper's Unwell banner as president. Bradford will be tasked with driving strategic growth and operations for the Gen Z-focused media company. Previously, she led the online shopping platform Honey through its acquisition by PayPal. She's also worked for SoFi, Pinterest, Yahoo, and Microsoft. Thanks for listening. This episode was written and reported by me, Cynthia Littleton, with contributions from Brent Lang. Stick, Snicks, Hick, Picks. Please leave us a review at the podcast platform of your choice, and please tune in tomorrow for another episode of Daily Variety.